We recommend this product be installed by a competent gunsmith.
Modification of your firearm may nullify the warranty of the firearm's manufacturer.
No liability is expressed or implied for damage or injury which may occur from improper use or installation of this product.
You are responsible for the safe handling, legalities, and use of your firearm.
Warning: always wear safety glasses when working on firearms. For this installation, you'll need a 3/32 inch pin punch, a 1/16 inch pin punch, a roll of tape, and a hammer. You might also need a file for adjusting the over travel stop on the trigger body. You'll also need a smooth jaw vise for pressing the trigger bar pin into the trigger body. The first thing you need to know about disassembling an SD or SDVE frame is that the rear pin on the Seer Housing has knurls on one side. Find those knurls and make sure you punch out from the opposite side of the frame. This is a critical point so you don't damage the frame when you're doing the disassembly. Now that we've identified the Seer Housing pin is unidirectional, we want to make sure to punch it out from the correct side. Push it out from the side opposite the knurling. Put the pin punch on and give it a few taps. Make sure to follow the pin all the way through with your pin punch. This will capture everything in place while we do the rest of the disassembly. When removing the Seer Housing block, I need to pay attention to the magazine disconnect that happens to be in this model. This frame happens to have a magazine disconnect system. This bar here and the spring and this bar down here are components of the magazine disconnect system. We'll have to reassemble this with these components in when we put the gun back together. If you don't have a magazine disconnect, this component, this spring, and this tab down here will not be present in your gun. At this point, I'll remove the pin punch from the frame. I'll roll it around, put my fingers on top, and hold everything in place. As I pull that pin out, I'll slowly release tension on the components. I'll pull the factory pin out the other side as well. And from here, I should be able to pull the magazine disconnect and spring out by pulling them forward out of the sear. I'll use my pin punch and take the magazine disconnect, and I'll pull it out and let it fall through the breech. And now I can also pull the spring out with a pin punch and set it aside. Now I can pull the Seer Housing out. I'll put my pin punch between the frame and the slide rail, and I'll pop it up and then grab onto the rails and wiggle it out of the frame and set that component aside. To disassemble the Seer Housing assembly, you'll note this one has a magazine disconnect. That's what this tab here is. We need to remove that before we do anything else. So on the models with a magazine disconnect, we'll use our 16th inch pin punch to punch that pin all the way through and out so we can remove the magazine disconnect component. To remove the sear and sear spring from the Seer Housing block, I use my 16th inch pin punch to press the pin all the way out, capturing the whole assembly. I'll put my finger on the end and hold it so nothing comes out. Then I'll press things from the bottom toward the top to push everything out. To remove the trigger pivot pin, I'm going to start with the trigger bar up in the full up position by pulling the trigger and making sure the trigger bar is up. From here, I'll grab the slide lock lever with my thumb on top and my finger below it so I can move it up and down and forward and back slightly. I'll put my pin punch on the left side, and as I wiggle the slide lock lever forward and back, I should be able to push that pin in so it starts to go through. Once it makes some progress, it should be relatively easy to go and pull it out. You'll notice that the trigger return spring sits in the notch on the pin ever so slightly. So pull the trigger bar up, that relieves as much tension as possible, and pull and twist the pin, and it should pop right out, all the way out from left to right. Now we'll pull the unlocking block out of the frame, along with the slide lock lever and the trigger and trigger bar. And now the frame is fully disassembled. The next step is going to be to remove the factory trigger bar from the factory trigger. All we're going to do is punch this pin through about 1/8 of an inch. I'll put this on top of my roll of tape to capture the pin for me. I'll put the punch on top and I'll tap it through. Once I have it far enough, I'll pull the pin out and the trigger bar separates from the trigger body. With the factory trigger bar removed from the trigger body, we're going to remove the trigger return spring by pulling it up and disconnecting it from the lobe on the trigger bar.